Hello, good morning, welcome, and thank you for bearing with us to be here today at the Australian Film, Television, and Radio's Virtual Open Day. We have an exciting and interactive and informative day planned, lots of interesting sessions. It is great to see so many of you here. How this is going to work. We're going to throw over to an amazing dynamic team in a minute, but as we begin, it's important to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where we're all coming from. The school is situated on Gadigal and Bidjigal land of the Eora Nation, and it's here we teach, we learn, and we tell stories. Take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where you're coming from, and acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging. All right, so we have a wonderful full array of people here. There's a chat feed. You can certainly ask questions in the chat feed. That will be monitored. But right now, I'm delighted to hand over to the amazing team of teachers led by the very dynamic Joe Hepworth. Welcome, and over to you, Joe.
Cool, good morning. Thank you, David. Thanks, everyone. So my colleagues here were just commenting in the pause that I looked like I was in a 1970s sitcom. I'm not. I'm actually in a classroom, but we have sets here in the corners of some of our classrooms to help us film and do particular exercises. So I'll kick off. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that, as David said, these are extraordinary times, and it must be challenging for all of you planning to go to university or higher education next year in such a time of uncertainty. And I think everyone at the school here feels that and feels for you in a very kind of mindful of what a difficult period that there must be for everybody. I also though want to just reassure everyone, because I think, periods of disruption can also be times of great opportunity. And I think that's certainly been true here at the school over this period of time. Likewise with the industry, all industries at the moment I think are going through a tough time, but conversely people are consuming, the public are consuming more content than ever before. And that's not just film, it's TV, it's streaming, social media, podcast, games, all different ways in which we're able to tell stories and reach audiences. And I say this in most open days, but I'm sure there's some parents out there or parents that you have who may not be with us, but who are wondering, frankly, whether this is a good career choice for you. Personally, I would be a little wary of any course that talked exclusively about film and filmmakers. But when you talk about creating great stories and telling them whatever the platform, actually there's never been a time in history where there's been a greater demand for content, and therefore a greater demand for the people who make that content and tell those stories, whatever the platform. And I think, rather than film being a risky bet, I think a career in the creative industries is more and more so, with the growth of AI looking like a kind of a safe, if anything, career choice. So that's a little something for the parents to reassure you early on. It's really the course at AFTRS is designed to capitalise on those kinds of opportunities there. So the first thing I'm going to do this a couple of times through this presentation, but I'm going to throw you over to one of our subject leaders, Cody, who's subject leader for Screen Business, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the kinds of jobs that our graduates are able to go into in order to capitalise on those opportunities.
Thanks, Joe. Look, I just want to say welcome, and also absolutely what Joe's saying about so many different opportunities, especially for niche content, and there's different formats, there's different platforms. So we've designed a course that will allow you to take those different pathways when you come out. So I guess if I had to explain them briefly, we would be looking at 3 potential pathways that you could come out with. So the first would be what we would call our generalist content creators. So these are people that are all-rounders. So what we would be teaching you to do is to be able to come out and do a whole range of things that might include being able to produce, come up with an idea, shoot, edit it. So it might be, you may have heard of the term shooter-producer. They are the kind of people, so they can come out and do a little bit of everything, because increasingly there's opportunities in that kind of area. We would also look at another pathway as our creative entrepreneurs. And these are people that would be more typically, I guess, your writer, director, producer, and they can develop content. They know about audiences, so there's a little bit more of the business aspect there, how to monetize content, which is a really important thing, and how to work with other collaborators, so they draw people in. And that would include things more going into some of those spaces like VFX, VR, interactive storytelling, all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, finally, we do have the third pathway where people come out, and that's more the entry-level specialist. So these are the kinds of jobs where you would be working perhaps for production companies or post-production houses, and you might go in as an entry-level specialist. So you might go in doing research, or as a camera assistant or an editing assistant, so you can work through that. So as you can see, there are multiple pathways, and we touch on everything here. So there's lots of opportunities for what is a very evolving screen landscape. Thanks for listening. Back to Joe.
Great, cool. Thank you, Katie. So the reason we create graduates with those skill sets is because we know that's what industry are looking for. And we know that because the course is developed with industry through our industry practicing tutors, our advisory panels, and the industry partnerships that we have here as well. But industry and employability is just one of our remits. We're all also unique at AFTRS in that we're also a national cultural institution. And that means part of our role is to develop Australian screen storytellers. So not just content creators working across multiple platforms, but also telling stories and stories that matter. One of the things that we believe is important in order to tell an Australian story is that it requires knowledge and understanding of people's groups and communities that make up Australia. And that's why we particularly encourage people from all backgrounds, cultures, experiences to apply to AFTRS, because we really believe that your stories are unique and that they're valuable. So that's what we do and why we do it. The next question is, how do we do it? So the short answer is through a blend of theory and practice. And we got a lot of questions about, you know, how much theory is there compared to practice? And it's a really difficult question to answer, because the way that we design the course is to try and integrate those two as seamlessly as we can. So I'm going to throw over to three more of our subject leaders to just tease that out a little bit more for you. So first up is Duncan from Screen Studies, then Caroline from Story, and then Simeon from Image. So I'll throw you to Duncan.
Morning, everyone. How are we all going? The BA Screen Production at AFTRS is a practical course. You get to do stuff. You get to make stuff. But there is no practice without theory. You can choose to ignore theory, but whether you're aware of it or not, you bring with you a whole set of ideas and assumptions about how stories should be told, about what makes them good, about what screen stories are for. Now, I teach theory, so I know that theory can be an uncomfortable, perhaps even intimidating word for a lot of people. It conjures up images of dense, boring, overly academic, overly complicated nonsense, which just kind of sucks all of the joy out of the thing that you love so much. But all theory is a series of attempts to answer questions like, how does screen storytelling work, and what's it for, and what's it supposed to do, and what's its function in our society? What's the relationship between the content creator, between the text and the audience? This course here at AFTRS isn't just about producing strong technicians. As Joe said, we want to help you become strong storytellers. So hand in hand with building your technical skills, this course will challenge and encourage you to think about, challenge the way you think about the screen in all its different forms, and the way you think about storytelling. In part, we do that by looking at what has come before, by getting to know and understand the tradition that you're inheriting. You aren't the first generation of people who wanted to try and tell stories on screen. The questions that you will be wrestling with are the same questions which others have wrestled with before. And we look at examples from the past, not so that you have to copy them. You may want to do the exact opposite, but to see the different ways that those fundamental questions have been answered by different people in different historical contexts. To appreciate the openness and the potential for screen storytelling to reinvent itself so that it can speak into a particular time and place. And let's face it, our particular time and place right now is quite a complex one on a number of fronts. We also challenge and encourage your thinking by helping you to know and understand yourself as a storyteller and as a consumer of content. What do you love about stories? What do you value in stories? What do you believe about stories? Why do you want to tell them, and what sort of stories do you want to tell? But that's all big picture thinking. I'm going to shoot you to Carolyn now to talk to you a bit more about practice and theory working together where the rubber hits the road.
Thanks, Duncan. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how theory and practice come together. Story is one of those areas where that really happens a lot. So for creative practitioners, there are lots of different kinds of theory to really get your teeth into, and all of them are going to nurture your own creative practice. There's the big picture stuff that Duncan's been talking about, where you learn to position yourself as a storyteller within your own time and society and culture. And then there's the theory and ideas that have emerged from the various craft areas that you might be interested in. Things like screenwriting or directing or cinematography or editing or sound, production design, and of course, production itself. So a lot of people have been engaged in these areas and thinking about how to become better practitioners for a really long time. And so here in the library, which is where I am today, you're going to find their ideas and their work. And at AFTRS, that's not just in the form of books, that's in the form of film and television programs, scripts and podcasts and interactive games and interactive stories. And you get to immerse yourself in how people before you have treated some of the ideas and themes that you're so interested in talking about. And that's really useful because culture evolves and themes re-emerge, and stories and ideas are not always necessarily entirely new. They come out of a broader historical context, like the ones that Duncan was talking about, but you bring yourself to them and you bring your lived experience of the world and your own insights, and that's how they become fresh and exciting. And so it's that interaction that's really important. Now, someone like Martin Scorsese knew this really well. When he was a film student, he worked his way through the film school library to see how people before him had interpreted the medium that he really wanted to make his own. And those approaches from other people really informed his own creative voice and helped him shape that, because he got to practice and try out techniques and strategies and see if they helped him say what he wanted to say, or if they didn't, if they weren't for him. So it's really this interplay between theory and practice that makes the AFTRS BA such a dynamic space for you to develop your screen storytelling skills. You're presented with ideas in the classroom and in lectures, and then you've got plenty of opportunities to kind of play around with them and see how they might actually work in practice. Simeon's going to talk in a minute a little bit more about how that plays out. And I guess I just wanted to finish with the idea that, you know, Martin Scorsese was a filmmaker in the 60s, but now, as Cody and Joe have been talking about, there are so many different pathways and so many different opportunities that you can avail yourself of with these skills. And so becoming fluent in the language of screen storytelling is going to equip you to not only take advantage of the more traditional areas such as film and television, but to just really go out there and immerse yourself in what's happening and what's evolving in the broader screen landscape. So I'm going to leave you with that thought, and I'm going to throw to Simeon, who's going to talk to you more about practice.
Welcome, everybody. I'm coming to you from Studio 4. You might be able to see that on the door behind me. This is one of the spaces, the teaching spaces that we use in the BA. I've also kind of surrounded myself with some of the tools that we use to create images and podcasts and other screen and sound works here at the school. These are the things that you'll be using while you're here. It's sort of fallen to me to cover off practice a little bit more, the definitive guide to practice. I don't think that's going to happen because it's something that we talk about a lot at the school. There's a lot of different definitions of it. Different people think of it in different ways. One of those definitions is that practice is something that comes from doing something over and over again and getting really good at it that way. And that's something that does happen here at the school. At the end of every teaching semester, you have a production block where you get to create works that enable you to practice all the skills and theory ideas that you've learnt during the semester. So you're constantly kind of working towards and then completing these great projects. But we also do a lot of practice in the classroom. Like, so in our workshops, we're always kind of teaching new craft skills and figuring out different creative ways we can express ideas, and creating kind of little mini works in our workshops, and sharing them and talking about them and doing that over and over again, so that we can kind of develop our skills to the point where we can really start to execute on our ideas. That, you know, it's one thing to have these great ideas. It's one thing to write these really amazing scripts bursting with these great characters, but you have to be able to create the world that they live in. You have to be able to share that with an audience in an impactful way. So that's what we try and cover off in image through the practice of making those artifacts. But it's the same with sound. And, you know, there's a lot of interest and development in podcasts and other different sound artifacts, binaural artifacts, all that stuff is kicking around here at the school. And because you get to dip your toe into all of these different areas, your personal practice as a creator kind of develops from this multifaceted kind of approach. And no matter what medium or format you choose, you get to kind of develop ideas here at the school. You have to overcome your fear about trying new things. You have to challenge yourself to do that. You'll get to learn from the teachers here. You get to learn enormously from one another, from your peer group. It's very special and very precious. And you engage in these amazing collaborations with one another towards a common creative goal. And that way, each time you do it again and again, you move further down the pathway towards developing your own personal practice and deepening your own personal practice. So as Caroline mentioned, practice is the doing that follows the thinking. It's putting your ideas into action, testing assumptions, applying theories, and seeing what works for you. And on the course, we call that experiential learning, and it's a really key part of what we do at the school. You get to deepen your personal process and refine your own individual creative voice by going through this process again and again. You also get to do that by using these cool tools, the things that I have around me, cameras and lenses, dollies and gimbals, lights, sound recording gear, all that kind of stuff. And excuse me while I grab my prop, which is supposed to come on now. Because as we all know, this is the cool bit, really, making stuff, right? So with that in mind, I will hand back to my dear friend, Joe Hepworth.
Great, that's the high budget AFTRS production values that we got there. Cool, so thanks for that, everyone. So the last thing I wanted to do in this very brief overview of the course is just talk a little bit about how it's structured. And I should just say that obviously there's a lot more detail that can be downloaded from the website. You'll be able to download a lot of this information, but I just wanted to give you a brief kind of summary, just so I could, I guess, give you some of the explanation and rationale behind it. So as you probably might have could guess by the way I've introduced the subject leaders, we split our subjects not by disciplines, which are disciplines are really about jobs, a screenwriter, a director, etc. Because we talk a lot about content creators and generalists and people who can work across discipline, which is really the way the industry is moving in so many different areas and ways. We have our subjects, things like story, screen business, image, sound, rhythm and juxtaposition, character and performance. They're more kind of conceptual areas. The reason we do that is, first, as I've just said, I think it helps us get out of that mindset of being a really narrowly defined job and role on set, which I think is really changing very quickly out in the real world, and into more of a space where people are learning the skills and concepts that they can adapt and apply in many different ways. The other reason that we do it, though, is because we recognise that some of you will be coming to AFTRS wanting to specialise. You know, you'll know that you want to be a cinematographer or a director, etc. Even if you do know, the idea that we're teaching in, you know, the idea if you want to be a screenwriter, for example, you know, image is key to that. Sound, the rhythm and juxtaposition of scenes, your characters and your performances. So the idea of structuring our subjects in that way is that it should make every single subject relevant to you, no matter where you might want to end up, either in a discipline or across a platform. So it's really about giving you those adaptable concepts and skills. And then obviously in our third year, you'll be able to see this again in the information that you'll be able to download. We do have electives that you can specialise in. All of the disciplines there are represented, including things like motion design, etc. So you'll be able to specialise and hone your craft skills in that third year. But after you've done all of those subjects, so each semester and you do your kind of image and story, sound and those subjects, at the end of each semester we have a production where you synthesise all of those different subjects and you apply it to an industry brief and an artefact. So I'm going to hand over to Robbie, who's our subject leader for production, and he'll be able to talk a little bit more about what's involved in production.
Thanks, Joe, and hi everyone. I'm Robbie Miles. Nice to meet you all, and looking forward to seeing you next year, if at all. So in each of the 6 semesters across the BA, you'll have a chance to create a production or work on at least one production. And the aim of these subjects is to synthesize everything you've learned from Caroline, from Simeon, from Joe, from Cody and everybody else, and use those to come together with key mentoring and tailored support to create a production that suits the brief for that semester. So in the first year, that'll be around experimentation and risk-taking. You'll have creative freedom to test out your ideas and experiment and try different things. Then in the second year, you'll be working to live industry briefs with our industry partners to create some non-fiction work, episodic, various other things. And then in the third year, you'll actually be working towards specialization and working in some of the key roles that you've favored over your time in the school. So in each of the 6 semesters, you'll create a production that brings together everything that's been the focus of that semester. One of the great things about the school is how closely aligned to industry we are. And one thing you'll see in all our production processes, it precisely mirrors what you will do out in the real world and prepares you to work on sets both here and overseas. Just recently, the school has had a huge impact and been a key leader in the COVID-safe protocols for our Australian industry, and that's actually been mirrored worldwide. So it's you'll have an excellent experience of learning how to work on set in a multitude of roles and do that professionally and in a way that would have you not standing out in any way whatsoever other than as a professional on any set in Australia or around the world. Back to you, Joe.
Great, thanks, Robbie. So that's pretty much it. We just wanted to give you a taste, really, a headline of some of the things that we care about, things like content creating and telling stories, employability, our links to industry, the importance of telling diverse stories and having a diverse cohort to tell those stories. Also, there's loads more resources on our website, which I mentioned. You can check them out. There's a more detailed course guide that you can download. You can see content made by current and former students on there. There's a great EMAG that's been put together with interviews from alumni and various other bits and pieces. And some application tips on there as well, because I'm sure some of you will be wondering, how to go about doing those applications. So have a good day. Thank you very much for bearing with the technology, and hopefully see you in a less virtual space in the near future. Thank you very much.